Rashmi, if recording is on or not?
No, sir, it is still not showing.
Please check again. I have
No, sir,
started recording.
it is not showing that recording is on.
Okay, let me do it again.
Sir, recording has started. It is
Thank you,
showing.
ma'am. Thank you, thank you. Participant, please keep your mic mute. Ma'am, I guess we should start now.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning, all. Sir, I'm audible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Good morning, all of you. Myself, Dr. Rashmi Prabha Singh. First, I want to welcome respected speaker, Professor Subhash Chandra, Emeritus Professor, IIT Delhi, on behalf of entire ILM College of Engineering and Technology. I also welcome all the participants of this FDP on waste technology. So it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Subhash Chandra. Professor Subhash Chandra, after completing his undergraduate degree in biochemical engineering from HBTI Kanpur in 1967, started his career in CSIR RRL Bhubaneswar and played an active role in the utilization of minor forest product and processing of marine products for food applications. After completing his PhD from IIT Delhi, he joined IIT Delhi in April 1979 as an assistant professor in the erstwhile Biochemical Engineering Research Center, later converted to Department of Biochemical Engineering and Biotechnology. At IIT Delhi, he has been actively involved with various academic, professional, and administrative activities, some of them being head of Department of Biochemical Engineering and Biotechnology, Vice Chairman, Chairman Gate, President, Board of Student Welfare, Coordinator, Technology Development, Mission on Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, and Chief Vigilance Officer. He was associated with the planning and coordination of the integrated MTech program in biochemical engineering and biotechnology at IIT Delhi. He has contributed more than 80 research papers in national and international journals and approx 100 conference presentations. Professor Subhash Chandra has been actively associated with large number of S&T organizations in the country to provide scientific expertise and professional services. He superannuated in August 2011 from DBEB from IIT Delhi, and since then he was associated as emeritus professor in the same department. He was also associated with NIT University as adjunct professor in biotechnology. So now I request Professor Subhash Chandra to start his presentation. Sir, it's over to you.
Thank you, madam, for your kind words of
Thank you.
introduction. And I take this privilege to, at the outset, thank the organizers of this faculty development program to give me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this challenging area of biomass conversion to ethanol, which is not only very topical in the current scenario of energy requirement, particularly the transport energy, the liquid fuels, and I'd like to share some of my thoughts, and probably my objective in this presentation would be more to expose to the challenges that needs to be kept in mind while setting priorities of R&D in this particular area. And rather than giving a perspective of the research. Now, second thing which I just wanted to make a remark right in the beginning is that while this faculty development program aims at waste management, I personally feel that in today's scenario there is nothing waste. Even the so-called lignocellulosic residues from agricultural crops is not a waste. It is a resource actually, and which can be judiciously utilized for a variety of purposes. Of course, the utilization pattern can create environmental and other consequences which needs to be taken into account. Probably I'll to some extent talk about it during the course of presentation. And my presentation essentially, if you see, is covering three major themes. One is the raw material, the so-called lignocellulosic residues, which are essentially the biomass material derived from plants, from agricultural crops that are primarily grown to provide us food and not for the purpose of the biomass, the residues which we are going to talk. So they are essentially the byproduct of our agricultural crops. The second is the product. I have chosen the product to be ethanol, which is an important biofuel in the sense that its demand in the recent years has been significantly increasing because of the Government of India's concern about our import bills of crude and blending our liquid transportation fuels like petrol and diesel with ethanol to an extent as much as 20%, although we are not able to reach that target because of the non-availability of ethanol from the current feedstocks. And third thing is the bioconversion process involved in the whole game. So these are the three major themes that I would like to be covering in my presentation. Now, if you look at broadly the various approaches for energy production from biomass, and you can see that there are three major sources for the biomass energy. The first is that probably where the specific energy crops are cultivated, particularly for the energy purpose rather than food. Now, essentially, such an option in our scenario is ruled out because of the limitation on the availability of land, which is primarily needed to grow food for the masses, and ours being a very highly dense populated country, the food requirement becomes a primary requirement, and therefore the specific energy crops, although are desirable, where you can design the whole agricultural pattern to provide you the total energy content rather than the grain output. The second is harvesting of natural vegetation, mostly from the forest resources, tree leaves, and other sources of biomass which can be used for this purpose. And third is recycling of agricultural and industrial residues. There is a large amount of agricultural residues, as we will see in one of the lists which I have provided. particularly from almost all crops, may it be rice, may it be wheat, corn, sorghum, or any other crop grown for food purposes. And in addition to that, there are several industrial residues like uh, sugarcane molasses, bagasse from sugar industry, which also provides you an attractive source of biomass for conversion to ethanol. And particularly, now basically I'll be concentrating more on the third option, third approach, whereby I'll be using raw materials from agricultural residues. And of course, in all the three categories, they can be converted to fuels, and the various types of fuel conversion processes which have been tried are alcoholic fermentation, anaerobic digestion to produce methane, and a mixture of carbon dioxide, what we call as biogas, combustion, thermal gasification, and finally transesterification, particularly to produce biodiesel, where the raw material are essentially the lipid component rather than carbohydrates. And so now here also among these options, I'll also choose alcoholic fermentation as the approach for the conversion of the biomass to energy, and which will form the focus of the presentation. Now all the bioconversion process can be primarily linked to photosynthesis, because our all biomass generation is essentially directly a result of the natural operation, so-called photosynthesis. We are all, most of us are familiar with this fundamental natural process in which the solar radiation, this energy from the solar radiation is converted into carbohydrates, and which becomes the primary source of raw material for a whole range of activities for food and energy. Now, if you look at the total potential, the total energy available from solar radiations on the Earth's surface is approximately equal to about 75 times the present proven bird fossil fuel energy reserves. If we consider the total potential bird fossil energy reserves, the energy which we get from solar radiations is almost 75 times of that. It's a huge quantity and can probably solve theoretically all the problems that we face through biomass. But of course, there are losses, there are features which essentially limit our use of this energy. The maximum availability to marine and terrestrial plant life, which give you the biomass, is about 60%. 40% of that is not available for absorption. Then out of which the photosynthetically active radiations, which are in the range of 400 to 700 nanometers, is only 43%. Rest of it does not contribute to photosynthesis. Then the plants, which are a source of biomass, absorb only 80% of that, 80% of the photosynthetic radiations. And again, efficiency of absorbed energy conversion into carbohydrate primarily, which gets converted into polymerization and polysaccharides and other material, is only 23%. Out of which there are respiration losses. Almost 66.7% of the biomass get lost through respiration, which essentially leads to a maximum overall efficiency, which is theoretical, is about 5.3%. Now this is, although in terms of the efficiency term numbers is very low, but still can give you a huge quantity of energy for use in the various options, including transport fuels. but the actual average efficiency of the plant biomass ranges from plant to plant and is about 1 to 2%. So as you notice that there is a significant gap in the theoretical overall efficiency and the average efficiency which is achieved, and this provides a very great motivation to work on improving this efficiency so that we can solve most of the energy problems that we encounter in our life. If you look at the evolution of biofuels from biomass, I am referring to only biomass essentially, not other sources of energy. The first generation of biofuels was generated in the form of ethanol from corn and molasses. Of course, in our country, the primary source is molasses, which is obtained from sugar industry based on processing of sugarcane, and the residue which is left after extraction of sugar is a dark viscous liquid, what we call as sugarcane molasses, which is primarily used as a raw material for most of the ethanol production distilleries. In some of the countries in the Western world, particularly USA, corn is also used as a source of ethanol, where they are able to cultivate, or the land is available for cultivation of corn over and above the requirement of food application. And they also use corn for, that was the first generation of ethanol production. Simultaneously, the biomass could be used, particularly multi-dimensional biomass, could be used also to produce biogas, which where primarily methane acts as a fuel source. And this was also in practice. Now the first generation processes are already in place and almost reached to a good efficiency. The second generation which we are looking today is the ethanol from lignocellulosics, the agricultural residues that are produced, or the agricultural crops that are produced for food purposes. And secondly, the second generation also includes the production of biodiesel from vegetable oils. Unlike the ethanol, which requires a carbohydrate feedstock, the biodiesel requires oil feedstock, the lipid or triglycerol as the feedstock. So, in fact, both these products, both these biofuels are essentially in the early stages, faces a lot of challenges, and therefore needs to be considered seriously for our application point of view. The third generation of which is in pipeline is the mass cultivation of algae. Now, algae is a plant biomass essentially which has a very high degree of photosynthetic efficiency, and if we are able to cultivate it or collect it from the marine sources, it can give us significant products, particularly like hydrogen and biodiesel from algal oil. And finally, the fourth generation is based on the genetically engineered energy crops. That means we engineer our crops not on the basis of providing them the grains or, for example, cotton, but for carbohydrate, particularly cellulose. The crop may also, the energy crop may also be considered from the point of view of the associated molecules, associated organic molecules like minimum lignin and hemicellulose in them. And they can definitely improve the overall efficiency of production of ethanol from the energy crop. Now that is probably a very theoretical, even today probably most of the genetic engineering approaches in the plant biotechnology are aimed at food crops rather than in energy crops. Now, I think the question arises, why ethanol from biomass? Now, in India, as most of you may be aware, that the government has taken a fundamental decision to blend all the transport fuel, particularly gasoline or petrol, almost to the level of 20%, so as to reduce the dependence on crude. Now, this is a very strong economic factor because we import almost about 70% of our crude needs, and therefore this can significantly reduce the burden on the budget from the imports of crude if up to 20% of the ethanol can be 20% of the petrol can be blended with ethanol. Secondly, the advantage it gives, the ethanol blending, it gives to reduce the greenhouse emissions. The petrol which is used in the automobiles or transport vehicles emits much less carbon dioxide compared to the hydrocarbons used in the case of crude, and therefore it can give us a very significant reduction in greenhouse gases and solve a major environmental problem in the country. Our number of automobiles, because of the better standard of living, has been increasing significantly over the years, and the greenhouse emissions need to be controlled. And finally, I think is the economic factor. We need to balance the cost of fuels against the escalating price of crude. Now, crude prices have become a point of a kind of a weapon, economic weapon based on geographical locations. The countries which are rich in availability of crude can dictate factors, and therefore the availability of ethanol from biomass can balance the cost of fuel. And fortunately, the countries which have to import crude are rich in biomass. So if they can use these biomass or lignocellulosic residues for ethanol, they can definitely take care of a large problem of the import cost. A very simplistic picture of the ethanol bioconversion. I'm sure most of you are familiar. I just wanted to summarize. The glucose available from biomass by a series of enzymatic steps gets converted into 1 mole into 2 moles of pyruvate and 2 moles of NADH in the process of glycolysis, with which all of you are familiar. And now this NADH, which is a reduced NAD, needs to be regenerated for continuation of the energetics, and the acetaldehyde is converted into ethanol, and the NADH is regenerated to NAD in the case of yeast and many other alcohol producing organisms, with decarboxylation of the acetaldehyde, and thereby you get from 1 mole of glucose you get 2 moles of ethanol in the whole process. Now basically the glycolysis, which is a process under anaerobic conditions, takes care of the energy need of the in the process you also generate 2 moles of ATP per glucose molecules, and thereby the growth of the cells can be, and this is essentially a growth associated process. If the growth is promoted, the ethanol production will continue. If the growth is stopped, the ethanol production will also stop. If you look at it from the material balance point of view, the conversion of 1 mole of glucose gives you, as I mentioned, 2 moles of ethanol and 2 moles of carbon dioxide by yeast or bacteria, whichever system for alcohol production you use. The carbon conversion efficiency is about 66.7% from C6 to C2, and of course 2 moles of C2, so therefore it is about 2/3. The fermentation efficiency, a very plus point, is almost in all cases at industrial level reaches more than 85%, although they target more than 90%, but still there are certain losses under industrial conditions, and it is even a figure of 85 to 90 is acceptable. The glucose required per kg of ethanol is about 1.96 kg. The various raw materials that can be used as a source of glucose are molasses, sugarcane juice, corn. All these are the first generation ethanol producer raw material, and agri residues which are cellulosic in nature, and cellulose needs to be hydrolyzed into glucose. Fortunately, cellulose is one of the largest, most abundantly available polysaccharide in nature and can be used for conversion to ethanol if we are able to provide a viable technology. Other than cellulosics, if you see, the different raw materials that are converted to ethanol in various parts of the world are sugarcane juice, sugar beet, molasses, potato, cassava, sorghum, and corn. Now here sorghum, when I say, I am referring to only sorghum juice. Sorghum is also a crop very similar to sugarcane. Now sugarcane doesn't have any grain, but sorghum also can carry grains, but it is only the sorghum stalk from which you can get a juice like sugarcane juice and can convert to ethanol. Now the total productivity of all these crops is shown on the last column in terms of liters per hectare per year, and as you can see that the alcohol yield, in terms of alcohol yield and the product, the molasses doesn't really have much of the land component because it is not produced for the purpose of ethanol, but it is only a byproduct from the sugarcane industry, and therefore there is no concern about this liters per hectare. The hectare business is not important. It is only the alcohol yield which becomes important, which is quite high, and the molasses is a very easily fermentable provides a very easily fermentable raw material. And now these are all the non-lignocellulosic materials. If we come to lignocellulosic materials, again it will have an advantage of no dependence on the land, because the raw material is already available from the crops, and therefore we need to concern only about the alcohol yield in terms of liters per ton. Now if you look at the bioconversion of lignocellulose to ethanol, the various factors, the various steps that are involved in the process are, I think the most important is the selection of appropriate feedstock, depending upon the location of the industry, where we want to locate, and the feedstock must be available in the nearby area, because the lignocellulosics being of a very low bulk density, their transportation can be very expensive, and therefore they have to be in the proximity of the bioconversion plant. The second problem, we are now facing very often in India, particularly with respect to rice straw, which is available abundantly in the northwest of our country, in Punjab and Haryana and western Uttar Pradesh. The rice straw, which does not find alternative application, is usually burnt on the field itself, now causes significant environmental problems. Now we need to be concerned about these environmental issues and find an alternative whether it can be converted to ethanol. But one of the major problems in the case of rice straw is, or any other lignocellulosic feedstock is compacting, because it's a very low bulk density. Transportation and storage is a serious problem. Of course, people have tried to find technologies for baling the rice straw and then staking, but that also adds to the cost of the raw material. So this selection process is very important. Of course, another alternative is the choice of bagasse from the sugar industry, which produces the residue from after expelling juice. The bagasse is a lignocellulosic material and can be used as a feedstock to convert to ethanol. The second issue, which is the second step of the issue, is pre-treatment and delignification. As I'll show later on significantly, that the lignocellulosic material from various sources contain, they are not the pure source of cellulose, rather they contain, in addition to cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin, because essentially the nature has designed this material as a structural material, and to serve the purpose of nature, the material, the cellulose should not be degraded very easily, and therefore they have been compounded along with lignin. And now this lignin is almost like a cementing material between the cellulose fibrils, and thereby cellulose fibrils are not attacked by the natural processes. The second step is saccharification or hydrolysis of cellulose. If we are able to remove lignin and hemicellulose, then we need to sacharify to convert into glucose. Now, for this, although we have alternatives like acid hydrolysis, but acid hydrolysis in the past has not been very successful, in the sense, besides losing a lot of cellulose in the form of other byproducts by acid hydrolysis, it also creates significant environmental concerns, problems, and therefore is ruled out. The other practical route is in the enzymatic saccharification, but again you need to produce enzyme at a reasonable cost so that the whole process does not go beyond the requirement, beyond the economic requirement of the ethanol production. Then the saccharified material, the glucose broth, need to be fermented to ethanol. Of course, at this stage we can say that the industry has very rich experience of using molasses, conversion to ethanol, and same experience rather hello, rather in the case of yes.
Please mute yourself. Anyone? Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. And in the case of fermentation of this saccharified material to ethanol, has a positive function in the sense, one is it's more clarified compared to the molasses, diluted molasses, and second thing, it doesn't have any other junk associated, which is usually present in the case of minerals and other calcined material. In the case of molasses, this is much neater material for conversion to ethanol. The only concern here becomes the concentration of the saccharified juice. Normally in the case of molasses, we go up to almost about 20% and 18 to 20% of sugar content, and getting in the fermentation broth or saccharified broth at that concentration is a real challenge. Finally, I think the recovery and purification remains almost as good or as bad as in the case of molasses conversion process. The fermented broth can be distillation, but of course distillation again is a energy consuming process. People have tried to look at alternative recovery processes, but so far I think still distillation has been the key recovery process. Finally, in the case of transport fuels, we need to get almost 99% pure alcohol, not 95, not rectified spirit, but you need to anhydrate, we need to remove the moisture, almost the last moisture of 4% by alternative routes, which has also been practically, I mean, sorted out and does not have much of the serious problem. I think a very major challenge lies in process integration. Unlike in the case of molasses, where it is a single step process, the cellulosics offer a more complicated scenario in terms of pre-treatment, storage of raw material, pre-treatment, saccharification, and now these has to be integrated in a optimum fashion and uh, in an economically viable manner. And finally, the scale of operation becomes important. Most of the time, the raw material being available in the proximity limits the scale of operation. But once you limit the scale of operation, the economics become unviable, and therefore this causes a serious problem. You must be able to get significant amount of the biomass raw material at a single point, thereby large scale plants can be operated economically and optimally. Now, this is just gives you an idea of the various raw material or lignocellulosic residues that are available. Now, they can be considered under three categories. There are agricultural residues. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, but this gives you some of the major raw materials that are available: rice straw, rice husk, wheat straw, jute sticks, corn stalks, or forest residues, particularly like forest leaves, tree tops, and other residues. And there are some agro-industrial byproducts like bagasse, oilseed cakes, sawdust, and I think in current scenario, the herbal residues. A large quantity of herbal plants are processed to extract the biologically active molecules, and which leaves huge quantity of residues in the field for processing, and they can be used very significantly, although not much effort has gone into that to get the use of their use for ethanol production. Now, out of which the star marked raw material like rice straw, wheat straw, and bagasse are probably the principal uh, feedstocks which are being considered for ethanol bioconversion. And these three alone constitute, of course, of the order of around 415 million metric tons per annum in India. And thus, it can provide a very viable feedstock for, and even out of this, even 50% of that can be converted into ethanol. It will be a breakthrough almost for meeting our transport fuel requirement. Now, some of the technical parameters that need to be considered before choosing a lignocellulosic residue for bioconversion. Of course, the most important is biochemical availability. What we are looking at is cellulose from these materials for bioconversion to ethanol via saccharification. So the raw material must possess the cellulose in a available form. It should not be just linked with lignin very strongly, which becomes a difficulty to get, and obviously it should be in high concentration because the whole biomass, only about half of it is cellulose, the rest of them other materials are there. So this concentration also becomes important. The environmental impact have to be taken into account. Now, in fact, I would say to the extent that the environmental impact, it can give a positive balance on the cost of the material. Like I gave you an example of rice straw. At the moment, it causes a lot of environmental pollution by burning it. Now, if we are able to collect it, use it, store it, and use it for bioconversion, it can provide you a much cleaner environment, and thereby that cost should be sort of given a due credit in the cost of the raw material. Otherwise, the collection cost, in fact, I am sure that these environmental costs should be easily able to compensate for the raw material handling cost in the case of rice straw. Although sometimes we ignore this effect. Finally, the quality of the raw material in terms of the active molecule. I think location is very important. As I mentioned, that in order to operate the plant in a very high scale of large scale, there should be adequately available raw material at one single point, or the plant should be located in the proximity of the availability of the feedstock. Of course, one of the problems associated with lignocellulosics is seasonality. Most of the crop residues will be available in a particular season over a short period, maximum 1 to 2 months. So the plant cannot remain idle, and therefore the plant has to be designed keeping in mind a variety of lignocellulosic residues so that they are available in different seasons. The raw material is available in different seasons, and one can operate the plant at least 9 to 10 months over the year. The next other issue which affects the lignocellulosic is their alternative use. While, as I mentioned, while the rice straw incidentally does not find much alternative uses except for burning, many of the lignocellulosics go into in the form of animal feed, particularly wheat straw. Bagasse is used for the manufacture of particle board and your kraft paper, and therefore their price will be determined, their cost will be determined, the raw material cost will be determined by the cost which the other alternative users are able to offer for this raw material, and has to be kept in mind. And finally, I think the local technology potential is very important. In the areas where there is a high level of technology available, the choice becomes easy in our, particularly for purpose of transport, availability of trained manpower, and all other factors. So these all factors need to be kept in mind while choosing the lignocellulosics for bioconversion process. And now the typical constituents in a lignocellulosic material, of course, from different sources it will have different chemical composition, but the range almost, I have just tried to give a range. The cellulose content varies from 35 to 55%. Obviously, as I mentioned that while considering the concentration as a parameter, we will always prefer the lignocellulose which has a 50 plus cellulose content, 50% plus cellulose content. The hemicellulose will also vary from 20 to 40%. As per the current technology, where hemicellulose is converted, can be converted into pentose sugars. Pentose sugars, and the higher pentose sugar containing raw material are not very useful, but of course, on the other hand, the pentose sugars can also be converted into ethanol by specific cultures, by specific microbial organisms which can utilize the pentoses. The high hemicellulose content can be taken care. I think the biggest culprit in the whole game of the lignocellulosics is the lignin, which is present from 10 to 25%. And removal of this lignin, because lignin acts as a cement onto the cellulose fibrils and does not allow the enzyme or the biocatalyst to reach to the cellulose fiber, and therefore it has to be removed from. Now, this is a highly energy consuming or uh, complicated process. Therefore, to meet the cost of the lignin separation, um, it is desirable that we are able to find an alternative application of lignins for uh, some high value, because lignins are essentially polyphenolics, and these polyphenolics can be used as a raw material for a large number of organic chemicals, besides as a feedstock for various uh, applications, in particularly automobile tires and other materials. Then the last component is silica and minerals. Now, silica and minerals, of course, it varies also over a range of 5 to 20%. The high silica content, particularly in rice straw, makes it difficult uh, on the use of the equipment and plants, and therefore it needs to be avoided. Low silica content is more desirable, like one in the case of bagasse is desirable. So these are the impact of the typical composition of the lignocellulosic matrix. As I mentioned that to remove lignin and hemicellulose, we need to make a pre-treatment. It is important because the whole lignocellulosic matrix essentially can be considered to be structured, a very structured material which has an amorphous region, a crystalline region, and of course the cellulose fibrils. In between, the lignin layers are embedded. Now this structure has to be broken before, because the crystalline region does not allow the enzyme molecule to reach to the cellulose fibers, and by way of mechanical or a chemical pretreatment method, it can be broken down. This needs to be broken down so that the cellulose fibers get exposed to the enzyme and substrate is accessible to enzymatic action, and thereby the glucose can be produced. And in the absence, and I will just like to say that if we use the unpretreated material, the fermentation, the saccharification yield by the enzyme usually often is less than 20%. And the major reason is not the poor efficiency of the enzyme, but the enzyme is not able to reach to the site of the substrate, and therefore the yield is very, very poor. On the other hand, the adequately pre-treated material, where the whole structure has been totally demolished and the cellulose exposed to the enzyme, this can be, the hydrolysis yield can be as high as 90% plus. So therefore, the pre-treatment becomes an important step for the economic bioconversion process. Of course, a large number of pre-treatment options have been researched, tried out, which can be categorized into physical, biological, and chemical pretreatments. The physical pretreatment, I think milling has been a very common approach. Different types of mills like ball mills, roller mills have been used. And now essentially the role of milling is to break down the crystalline structure. And the breaking down of crystalline structure and also reduce the particle size of the raw material, thereby the specific surface area increases and the enzyme is able to act more efficiently. But these physical methods are highly energy intensive and very often do not meet the energy balance required in the process. The steam explosion at high pressure can also convert the biomass material, almost like a popcorn kind of scenario where it gets exploded and the whole structure is demolished. There have been a number of biological processes, particularly the fungi and actinomycetes, which are able to degrade lignin and bring it into soluble form and releasing the cellulose and hemicellulose for bioconversion process. Again, the process has been too slow. Their rate of substrate uptake has been very slow, and therefore they are, although from the theoretical point of view they seem to be very attractive, but practically they have not found much of application. On the chemical pretreatment side, I think the most common has been steam explosion, ammonia treatment, and explosion using carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, treatment with acids and alkalis. Now, in the case of alkali treatment, which is primarily a process also alternatively used in the case of paper manufacture, where the same lignocellulosic material are digested with alkali at high pressure, thereby leaving a pulp with cellulose fibrils, which is used, and after bleaching, which is used for paper manufacture. The acid, the sulfuric acid or hydrochloric acid, can also be used to pre-treat, but again there is significant loss of yield in the case of acid treatment. Similarly, oxidizing agents, particularly hydrogen peroxide, ozone, have been used for pre-treatment, and catalytic organic solvents have been used, whereby in a catalytic chemical process they can do the same job as the various other chemical pre-treatment methods and give you ideally. But again, they need to be evaluated on the basis of their cost involved per ton of the raw material, and of course on the basis of yield. Now the next step comes in the whole process after you have pre-treated and converted a lignocellulosic feedstock into a cellulosic biomass, where cellulose can be converted into glucose by enzymatic hydrolysis. You need the enzyme, what we commonly know as cellulase. Now, cellulase essentially, I must make it very clear here, is not a very simple single gene product. It's not a pure single protein which is used as an enzyme here. It's a complex molecule, it's a complex material which consists of a large number of proteins. Of course, the composition of the cellulase enzyme from various sources can differ in terms of its, and therefore their function also differs. Now, as a matter of fact, in terms of the application, I think the Trichoderma raceyi, Trichoderma raceyi has been most effectively used as a source of cellulase, mainly because of its capacity to process high concentration of protein in a shorter time, its productivity of proteins during its growth, and therefore the Trichoderma raceyi cellulases have been most commonly employed for. Of course, the other cellulases also can be used, but again they will all be limited to their capacity to synthesize the cellulase proteins. Now, as I mentioned that the cellulase essentially is a very highly structured enzyme with a number of components. Basically, you can say that the component can be in the category of four major. One is the rather three major categories. One is the endo-beta-glucanase, which acts randomly on the cellulose fibrils, and releases the ends and forms small chains of cellulose, small chains of glucose and small patches of cellulose, now which is acted by two different components, either exoglucanases or cellobiohydrolase. The exogluconases and cellobiohydrolase can produce either single glucose molecule from the terminal ends, or cellobiose, a dimer, this glucose dimer, cellobiose, uh, can be uh, generated for further conversion to glucose. Now, to convert cellobiose into glucose, a third component is present, beta glucosidase, which hydrolyzes the cellodextrins, particularly cellobiose or cellotriose, the cellodextrins into glucose molecules. Now, this glucose molecules then can be fermented to ethanol. Essentially, so we need all our cellulose fibrils, original cellulose fibrils, which have been obtained after a pre-treatment process, into glucose moiety. And now the enzyme which is derived from the microbial sources has to be a balanced cellulose preparation in all the three components. Then only it can give you a proper raw material, proper product from the saccharified product. Otherwise, and this essentially all the three enzymes, three groups of enzymes. In fact, in many of the cultures, each of the three components are also present in multiple proteins forms. They act synergistically, and therefore their proper combination, their proper proportions become very important. Now, the cellulose hydrolysis should be considered on the four major parameters. One is the yield of hydrolysis. Now, yield I must because very often we can confuse with our nomenclature. By yield I mean, yield essentially is a dimensionless parameter, which means gram per gram, grams of glucose obtained per gram of cellulose hydrolyzed. The sugar concentration, the final concentration of glucose which is obtained, again plays a very important role in the further alcoholic fermentation form, because if it is too low, it needs to be concentrated, and concentration is a cost intensive operation, and therefore it should be high sugar concentration. The time of processing, because the time of processing, time of hydrolysis plays a key role again on the equipment sizing, and therefore have to be kept in mind. And finally, the enzyme loading. Enzyme loading means the international units of the enzyme provided per kilogram of the feedstock, per kilogram of the cellulosic material. Now, these four parameters need to be optimized for any cellulose preparation, and the optimum parameters have then to be used for the whole process. Now, essentially, these four parameters essentially will depend upon the cellulosic material. That means the type of pre-treatment you choose. That means the quality of cellulose you are able to produce from your feedstock. The enzyme stability. The enzyme, again being a fragile molecule, can lose its stability. Then enzyme composition. Now, enzyme composition here is important, because as I mentioned that you cannot really use any specific component of the cellulose preparation as a measure of the enzyme activity. You may have a very high endogluconase activity or an exogluconase activity, or and a low concentration of the beta glucosidase. Ultimately, you will end up during synergistic action in a very poor performance in terms of the cellulose hydrolysis performance. So the enzyme component essentially, enzyme composition essentially is considered in the form of filter paper activity, which takes into account all the three components and ultimately measures the quantity of glucose produced per unit mass of cellulose. And this FPA has to be adequately large enough and not any individual component. And of course, the enzyme characteristics In addition to this composition, the enzyme characteristics like catalytic efficiency, which is a ratio of kcat to km, based on FPA, based on filter paper activity, is thermal stability, very important from the recycling point of view, because of the cost of the enzyme involved, we will always desire to recycle the enzyme after every batch of use. The product inhibition pattern, which I will discuss in due course. The shear sensitivity of the enzyme again relates to the thermal to the stability of the enzyme and the composition. So these characteristics, along with the processing characteristics, must form the basis of selection of the enzyme and the hydrolysis pattern. I'll try to probably, it's a very interesting slide for me, which I often use to illustrate. We all know that starch has been used as a source of glucose for ages, and it has totally replaced the glucose production technology from in the beginning, depending upon the acid hydrolysis of starch today to enzymatic hydrolysis. In the case of enzymatic hydrolysis of starch, the key enzyme, the limiting enzyme is glucoamylase. Whereas in the case of cellulase, which is also a glucose chain, it has not still proven to be a good source of glucose. What is the reason? And I just tried to look at the literature and found out that the specific activity of the glucoamylase, which is commercially used, is almost 70 international units per milligram of protein. And the maximum velocity can go as much as 58 moles of product glucose per mole of enzyme per second, which is quite high. And therefore, the starch hydrolysis is a very favorable process, bioconversion process to produce glucose. On the other hand, if you consider in case of cellulase, although endoglucanases are essentially the same figures as of the glucoamylase, but the overall picture of the capacity of cellulase to saccharify is given in terms of filter paper activity. And the filter paper activity essentially refers to 0.6 units per milligram protein as compared to 70 units per milligram protein in the case of glucoamylase. And also the maximum velocity goes to 0.5 moles product per mole enzyme per second as against 58 moles per. So you can see that there is a significant difference. And now what I am trying to say that in the case of designing our designer cellulase preparation, it is the filter paper activity which needs to be optimized. This needs to be maximized, and I can assure you that even if we can improve upon these figures by tenfold, maybe through genetic engineering. Of course, the unfortunate part is that the current molecular biology and genetic engineering approaches and efforts have been largely dependent upon, largely devoted to healthcare, the healthcare which is life-saving operations, and not to industrial biotechnology, whereby this FPA can be optimized through genetic engineering. And this need to be increased to at least tenfold so as to achieve to the efficiency of starch hydrolysis. And once if we are able to achieve that, probably the cellulosic materials will be at our hand to use for source of glucose. Sorry. Now finally, after you have saccharified and got a glucose syrup, from one is that now our hydrolysis, as I mentioned during the hydrolysis process, the concentration of glucose is an important parameter, but we need a ethanol producing organism, which Saccharomyces cerevisiae is a age-old tool in our hands, which have been improved upon over a time, and it should, and the ideal ethanol producing organism would be the one which, which can ferment a broad range of sugars rapidly. I would say the ideal would be that it can consume both hexoses as well as pentoses, although it doesn't exist so far. But I think our research efforts should be directed to develop a ethanol producing organism which can use both hexoses and pentoses as a source of carbon and convert it into ethanol. It should also have ethanol tolerance. It should be able to tolerate ethanol concentration more than 10%. The current ethanol producing strains used in Indian distilleries is around 8 to 9%. 8% ethanol tolerance is available, although which used to be 6% when I was a student, and but it has gone up to 8 to 9%. It should not lead to many byproducts, which will again improve the efficiency of the ethanolic bioconversion process. It should be osmotolerant, thermotolerant. Normally, most of the Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast are not thermophilic, they are normally mesophiles, and anywhere when the temperature rises during the alcoholic fermentation, there is some metabolic heat generated which will increase the temperature, and thereby the temperature goes above 35 degrees centigrade, the cells start dying, and that becomes a result of this becomes a reason for poor performance of the ethanolic bioconversion. The culture should be thermotolerant so that it can go up to at least 40 to 45 degrees centigrade. Well, again, here I must say that ideal would be that if our yeast, our culture, microbial culture for producing ethanol can be compatible with the hydrolytic process, cellulose hydrolytic process, because cellulose hydrolysis goes at about 55 to 58 degrees centigrade, optimum temperature. If the same temperature is attainable for the ethanol producing organism, it will be an ideal solution. Which is difficult to achieve, I know, but it should be somewhere in the close range. The cell viability should be maintained during recycling, high cell density. There are many processes where the cells are recycled during fermentation. The viability should be maintained, and of course, which can be maintained by appropriate sedimentation characteristics to facilitate cell cycle, the cell recycle. Because often we don't tend to use the centrifuges for cell recycle. By normal natural settling velocity of the cells, one can use the cell recycle, give it some storage, some settling time in a tank, and whereby the cells can be recycled, and so they should have good sedimentation characteristics. Now, these are the issues which are essentially aimed at arriving at a good ethanol producing organism. Not that all of these can be achieved in a single culture or by a single person, but I think our target should be based on these kind of parameters. Even if we can probably attain one or two of these, it will be a good development in the case of the bioconversion process. The ethanol, glucose to ethanol process will also depend upon, as I mentioned, that there are the bioprocess criteria can be classified in terms of raw material, the quality of the glucose syrup, biocatalyst, the fermenting organism, the technology. Now, there are large number of variety of technologies like cell recycle, continuous culture, the immobilized cell technology, and finally, I think distillation is common to all the bioprocesses, and therefore this is one. So basically, and finally, fifth one is effluent treatment and water recycling. In my opinion, the fifth operation considered here is very important. While in the case of effluent treatment, the lignocellulosic bioconversion offers a much better picture because the effluent are much cleaner compared to molasses fermentation. but it is a highly water consuming process. If we are able to recycle water, and recycling water means producing less quantity of effluent for processing, it can give us a big advantage in terms of the process economics. I think a very important feature of the bioconversion is the inhibitory pattern, which the process follows, right starting from cellulose, which is a, let us say, C6N, where N molecules of glucose are linked in the cellulose fibrils, to ethanol. Now, as you see that there are a number of inhibitions which are available. Now, our cellulase preparation, if we are able to generate the cellulase preparation and the fermentation culture in such a way that these inhibition patterns can be minimized, it will give you a big boost in the productivity of the whole process. Now, the various inhibition patterns can be classified into four categories. The first is the glucose and cellulose present in the cellulose hydrolysate. They inhibit the cellulase enzyme itself. And as the hydrolysis progresses, the cellulase enzyme is inhibited. The saccharification is inhibited, and therefore this creates a bottleneck in the hydrolytic process. Ethanol produced from the glucose also inhibits the alcoholic fermentation, whereby you set a limit of, let us say, 8% of ethanol, which inhibition can be minimized. It can give a good productivity. The ethanol also inhibits the cellulase enzyme or the hydrolysis process. Ethanol, when produced, it not only inhibits the alcoholic fermentation, it also inhibits the saccharification process. And finally, the accumulation of cellubiose, the C12 sugar, the dimer, glucose dimer, when it gets accumulated in the system, it reduces the yield of fermentable sugars. Because whatever is the glucose accumulated in the form of cellubiose, you are losing glucose. And therefore, as little as possible cellubiose now this will require essentially a high dose of beta glucosidase, which can convert cellubiose into glucose. So the whole biocatalyst design, whether it is in terms of cellulase enzyme, whether it is in terms of the microbial culture for ethanolic fermentation, should be looked into from overcoming these inhibitory patterns. Of course, various processing strategies that have been reported in literature are summarized here. Now, the whole thing has been categorized into four events: cellulase production, cellulose hydrolysis, hexose fermentation, and pentose fermentation. Now, the first category processing strategy is separate hydrolysis and fermentation. You hydrolyze separately and ferment separately. The second is simultaneous saccharification and fermentation, in which saccharification and fermentation are carried out in the same equipment, and thereby you can reduce on your plant cost. But of course, here the limitation is that the processing conditions during hydrolysis, saccharification, and fermentation should be as close as possible, particularly in terms of pH and temperature. pH is compatible, but temperature is not compatible, and therefore the design of the biocatalyst should take care of that material. Simultaneous saccharification and co-fermentation, where the cellulose, the pentoses and hexoses both can be fermented together, is another category, which of course gives you a good opportunity to get much higher yield of ethanol per ton of cellulosics. And of course, consolidated bioprocessing. Now the whole process has to be looked into in a consolidated manner, assuming all the four events together, and the optimization has to be carried out in terms of all the four events. Well, I have told about simultaneous saccharification and fermentation, which has been the most extensively studied process strategy whereby the hydrolysis and fermentation can be carried out. But again, as I mentioned, that there are requirements like compatibility of the two biocatalysts, the cellulase enzyme as well as the alcohol fermenting, the glucose fermenting culture to alcohol. The and second thing, probably a very important is the optimum level of beta glucosidase, because if the C12 molecule, the cellobiose, is accumulated, it will create a loss of yield of the whole process. Now, just to take I think I'll just like to give some additional picture of another feature that which I considered a very important dimension in the whole game of ethanol production. Whether can we use the whole crop as a feedstock, not necessarily on the lignocellulosic residue or the juice alone, like we are doing today, or the molasses arriving from that, but can we use the whole crop today? Although in the case of sweet sorghum, the crop which I have chosen to present today, uh, uh, India is one of the largest producer of sweet sorghum, probably second largest in the world. But our yield is very, very poor, and if we are able to choose a good crop of sorghum, we can um, solve much of the ethanol problem. An alternative to sugarcane. Now, it also gives you a very high biomass yield, high percentage of fermentable sugars and organics, shorter growth period, tolerance to drought stress, a very, sort of sturdy crops in terms of drought stress and fertilizer requirement and water requirement. Now, the advantage of the whole crop, I want to take that all the three components of the crop, grains, the biomass, lignocellulosic biomass, and juice, all the three components are available in this crop, which can be converted to ethanol. Well, I chose for my studies, which was supported by Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, a sweet sorghum crop, uh, I mean, thankfully provided to me by IARI in 1996. Now, out of the five sort of samples they gave me from their demonstration farm, I chose PC 121, which was a single cut variety and with the 120 to 150 days cycle time from mid-June to June, October end, rain-fed and requires low fertilizer input. The total plant biomass yield was 620 quintals per hectare. The dry matter content is about 217 quintal per hectare. The juice recovery from this dry matter from the stalks was 27,900 liters per hectare. Total, now these are all calculated figures. Of course, I took only a small sample and extrapolated to get per hectare figures. The total fermentable sugars from the stock juice was 15.8%, which resulted in 44,408 kg per hectare. The bagasse generated was 186 quintals per hectare, and the grain was 12.5 quintals per hectare. Now, I must thank Dr. Solomon, who was the geneticist who was responsible for growing this variety, and I interacted with him. Now, this is the demonstration field from where we were given the sweet sorghum, and this is a picture of Dr. Solomon himself. Now, the sweet sorghum can give you from stalks to juice, which can be converted to ethanol. Now, this juice is almost very similar to sugarcane juice, both in terms of composition and appearance. The bagasse plus residue of the crop through simultaneous saccharification and fermentation can give ethanol. The grains can also be processed by liquefaction and saccharification to ethanol. All the three components, and probably it can result in a very integrated technology for ethanol production. They mentioned the of course, the processing of juice and the grains is a very standard practice, and not much of research was done. And it was, but I was mostly concerned with the bagasse available from the sorghum milling. Now, this is again the saccharification of liquefied sorghum grain. Instead of using the classical suspended, stir tank reactor, I preferred a immobilized uh, amyloglucosidase uh, after liquefaction, a immobilized enzyme column for conversion to glucose syrup at the process conditions which are the carrier used was activated bagasse, which was also the sorghum bagasse, and I used this chemistry by treatment with epichlorohydrin and hexamethylene diamine. I was able to get positively charged matrix, and now this positively charged matrix was used to immobilize uh, by absorption of the glucoamylase onto it, which was used in the immobilized column for hydrolysis of the liquefied uh, starch. This was the bioconversion of the. Now, sorghum juice and these saccharified grains were mixed together and fermented. And this is the profile of the sugar concentration, which essentially goes down, and the ethanol fermentation goes up. The bagasse was then treated like on the various parameters that I discussed earlier for delignification, and I used alkali pretreatment. And particularly, I chose this method because the bulk large scale facility was available to me from a kraft paper mill and near Muradabad, and I used their facility, the pulp digester, rotary digester, to convert the sorghum bagasse into the pulp. Now, the original sorghum bagasse, the sorghum pulp consisted of cellulose 38%, hemicellulose 27, lignin, and crude protein 7.5. Now, these are the conditions of pretreatment, the delignification process in a digester, and at a pressure of 4.2 kg per meter square for over 3 hours time, washing and then drying. I was able to get almost 89 to 90% pulp based on the original bagasse. And now, as you can see that if I compare this treatment with the sugarcane bagasse, we were able to get 42% yield. Here we were able to get almost 48.5% yield. Enzymes were produced. The Trichoderma raceyi was produced by solid state fermentation with the enzyme activity as high as, of course, 40 international units per gram solid. And now this is the solid line is the FP activity, filter paper activity, and the one is beta glucoside. As you will notice that it is is very poor in beta glucosidase, and therefore it needs to be supplemented externally to get a good synergistic action. We produced, of course, this was the Trichoderma raceyi, and beta glucosidase we separately produced by Aspergillus venti, and of course almost about 8.1 units per ml, international units per ml, which was mixed with the Trichoderma raceyi culture to get a synergistically active good enzyme preparation. And then we were able to convert this the pre-treated pulp into ethanol in again an immobilized cell in which the yeast cells, Saccharomyces cerevisiae cells, which were thermotolerant, provided by IMTEC Chandigarh, which had the tolerance of about 38 degrees centigrade, and we were used, and on the matrix cellulase was impregnated, and solid to liquid ratio of 1:5, and yeast was immobilized 40 milligram per gram, and they were used for hydrolysis. This shows the bioconversion of the pulp to ethanol, where the Saccharomyces cerevisiae IMTEC strain was used, and as you see that initially the glucose concentration goes up, that means the fermentation rate is poor, and as soon as the fermentation rate picks up, the glucose concentration almost goes zero, and the ethanol buildup takes place. Almost about 4.2% of ethanol was produced maximum. Integrated process diagram for pulp hydrolysis, for the pulp saccharification and fermentation, and is shown here. And of course, the only problem is that compared to molasses fermentation, this is a much more complex process and requires much higher capital investment, and therefore the optimization becomes more important, and also scale of operation becomes more important, so as to get the benefit of the scale of operation. A summary of our total sweet sorghum bioconversion. The sweet sorghum, it is on the per hectare basis. 620 quintals of sweet sorghum from 1 hectare was able to give me ethanol totally from different sources, juice, then fermentation, and from panicles, residue, grains, liquefaction, saccharification. Finally, total quantity of ethanol we were able to get was 4,528 liters, which is significantly good, in my opinion, process for use for bioconversion process. So finally, I like to conclude by saying that one is that the whole conversion process, although technically feasible, but has a lot of challenges, particularly economic challenges, and therefore to meet these economic challenges, we must very critically examine the various issues that I have discussed in the presentation, particularly the choice of raw material, the location, the scale of operation, the choice of the sort of enzyme for hydrolysis, the yeast or the alcohol fermenting culture, and they need to be very critically evaluated. But if we are successful to do that, the conversion of biomass residues to ethanol can provide a decentralized alternative to meet transport energy needs in the country in a sustainable manner, because ultimately our whole economy is based on agricultural crops, and these agricultural crops cannot be compromised. So lignocellulosics will be available in large quantity, and therefore they can really be sustainable. But it requires a close look into the techno-commercial issues influencing the process economics. And also, I'm pretty sure that this will also take care of a lot of pollution problems. With this, I thank you, and I would like to acknowledge the Department of Biotechnology for the sweet sorghum project which they supported. Two of my colleagues, Ms. Monica Jain, who was a research assistant in the, and Dr. Anita Srivastav, who essentially helped me in various technical processes. I'd like to thank them for. So, thank you very much for your patience hearing. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to share. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. Now I request to the participant, if you have any question, you can ask directly, or you can put your question in the chat box.
Participants, if any question is there, you may interact directly to the sir as well. Sir, I would like to take this opportunity to ask you one question into this sector.
Please, I expect it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, would you please enlighten us the application of membrane technology if we go by chemical pre-treatment? As you said that chemical pre-treatment has already been ruled out into this domain. So while chemical pre-treatment is more faster than biological pre-treatment, so if we go by using membrane technology, separating the inhibitor and all, so will it be feasible technology in days to come?
No, you are membrane technology. You are referring for pre-treatment or for hydrolysis?
After pre-treating the biomass with chemicals, I'm referring membrane to separate and concentrating sugar, fermentable sugar, and taking aside the inhibitor generated into the chemical pre-treatment.
Concentration of sugar, that means that is beyond the pre-treatment. After you have pre-treated, you can concentrate the sugars during hydrolysis.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, this is not really pre-treatment. This is the hydrolysis, primarily hydrolysis, where you are able to get a more concentrated sugar syrup for fermentation. For fermentation, and of course, technically there is no problem. People have, I think, as early as in late 70s, sometime, if I remember correctly, Professor Ghosh, while he was in the US, Ghosh and Caustic presented a ultrafiltration reactor for hydrolysis of the lignocellulosic, in which he demonstrated continuously hydrolysis with a concentrated syrup, almost about 14 or 15% glucose syrup during hydrolysis. But again, the problem there is not really technology. The major problem is availability of membranes at a reasonable cost. Because you are handling a biomass, and as the hydrolysis progresses, the biomass becomes fragile, and a lot of fine fibers, very fine fibers, they can clog the whole membrane. So the most important parameter there, which probably I have my own doubts, because initial rates you can consider very nice, but on a long term, the membrane may not be able to perform the same job because of these fibrils which are released from the hydrolytic biomass. And so on a long term, whether it will be feasible, I have very big questions in my mind. Although for initial studies, for initial hydrolysis and collection of the fermented sugar, it is a nice concept. And second thing, as such, the cost of the membranes, of course, now things have improved because we have now ceramic membranes.
Yes, sir.
Having polymeric membranes, but now we are having ceramic membranes which can be repeatedly used, which can be hydrolyzed, which can be sterilized, repeatedly used. The problems have significantly improved, but again, their cost is still high, and the cost has to be kept in mind.
Okay, so one more question is there. So, while going through hydrolysis, there are many byproducts have been generated in terms of like different fragments. As you brightly mentioned that cellobiose is there, one that is going to inhibit the process. So, what are the techniques that we can use to ensure maximum convertibility? So to reduce all these different fragments into the broth.
Biose is the biggest culprit, and as I mentioned, the only solution is that the enzyme, the cellulase saccharifying enzyme, must have a high dose of beta glucosidase. So either we choose a cellulase preparation which has a high content of beta glucosidase, or we can separately produce it, as I have done in the case of sorghum, separately produce and mix it, blend it with our cellulase preparation, so that if the beta glucosidase content is high, the FPA will also be high, because then the cellulobiose accumulation will not be there.
Okay. Yes, sir. And one last question, sir, I would like to ask that given the so much consideration into this domain, right, the biological conversion is very slow.
Yeah.
And that is something which is lacking, and a biggest hurdle into this domain, getting a technically viable solution. So, what are the in your opinion, what could be the best optimization strategies to enhance the biological conversion rate so that we don't need chemical methods?
Well, I think today we have an additional tool. One is that the screening process, the sort of screening or isolation of the right organism. But this is supplemented with our genetic engineering approaches. If we can optimize our organism, a genetically engineered organism, which can really do the thing much faster, or in terms of it has in a single organism, you have a much larger mechanism or a much larger machinery introduced by genetic engineering to process the lignin. Because ultimately what you are doing, these organisms are consuming lignin as a carbon source. If the organism uses cellulose as a carbon source, it is useless. It should be able to consume lignin as a carbon source. And so this lignin consuming mechanism should be upgraded through genetic engineering, then you can get a much better organism. But as I mentioned very clearly, in my personal opinion, while interacting with many of the good molecular biologists and genetic engineers, they are not very interested in these organisms. They are more interested in single gene products used for medical biotechnology, for healthcare, because of the cost involved. Because this is a high volume, low cost product. So
Okay.
they are more low volume, high cost product.
Yes, sir. Sir, if you allow me one more last question, sir.
Yes, yes.
So I have wondered many times that there are first generation abundant raw material is available, and we are having a opportunity to be leader into this domain of bioethanol using first generation raw materials. So, as per your opinion, what is the basic lacking that why we don't go into the first generation instead of second generation? I mean, there are so many technical challenges into second generation, not
Yeah.
into the first generation as. So why don't we adopt first generation biomass for this or materials?
There are two reasons. One is the first generation includes cereal grains as a raw material for, like United States uses corn as a major raw material for fermentation to ethanol. But in our case, because of the huge population and our sort of poor agricultural efficiency, I would say, still our agricultural yield or crop yield per hectare is probably one of the lowest in the world. And that means we essentially are able to, we are consuming a lot of land for relatively smaller quantity of grains. And if we can improve upon that and make a lot of land available for growing like corn or sorghum or variety of other cereals, we can definitely do first generation. And second thing, I think another major probably first generation activity can emerge around our waste cereal, because unfortunately we also waste a lot of cereals and agricultural crops like potato. And almost every alternate year, we hear wastage of uh, uh, wheat, rice, potato in the godowns. Now, if that can be also used for conversion, if we have access, we can immediately take. But again, that depends upon the decision process, decision making process, which is unfortunately too slow and suboptimal. If we can take a quick decision, whatever is the excess can go into ethanol industry. Technologically wise, definitely there is no problem. Our distilleries are also well equipped, and the only thing is that the raw material should be available immediately to In fact, as a matter of fact, to be honest, in the last 10 years, I would say, many of the good distilleries, technically advanced distilleries, have diversified their raw material feedstocks. In fact, to be honest, in fact, I am of the opinion personally that our ethanol production totally meets three kind of requirements. One is as an industrial alcohol for chemical industry, transport blending for the transportation fuel, and a very major, almost 50% of the alcohol produced goes for potable alcohol. Potable alcohol for making liquors. Now, I am of the opinion that 100% of the molasses should be directed to uh, uh, to your industrial alcohol and the transportation alcohol. And the the whole requirement of potable alcohol should be met from cereal grains or to sugar. Potato, because they can sort of sustain the cost part easily.
Yes, sir.
But the industrial alcohol and the transportation fuel cannot sustain a very heavy cost, because you have a limitation of cost of petrol. You cannot go
Yes.
beyond that. Therefore, all the molasses should be directed for transport fuel, and the cereals and the tubers like potato or cassava should be directed to potable alcohols. It will also indirectly it will also improve the quality of our potable liquor, which today is an unfortunate scenario. We are not able to export our potable liquor because of the quality, and which also will make our potable liquor exportable and also release lot molasses for transport fuel. Well, this is what I personally believe, but again, the decision is at other ends.
Thank you, sir. Let me tell you, participant, that sir is really a guiding force towards my PhD topic, and he always motivated me to do well into this field. Thanks a lot, sir, for such an enlightenment talk and very detailed technical presentation. Over to you now, Rasmi ma'am.
Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, one question from my side. Is there any appropriate biomass particle size to produce optimum ethanol production?
That well, in fact, while talking about pre-treatment, I mentioned, you see, one of the parameters in a good pre-treatment process is the reduced particle size or surface area per unit uh, cellulose, per unit biomass. Now, if you can, as fine as you can grind, the efficiency will be very good. But again, when you do grinding, ball milling, to go any particle size lower and lower, the energy consumed is very high. I mean, proportionate, it increases almost in logarithmic proportion. I mean, so therefore, that essentially the energy consumption puts a limit, and you are not able to go to a very fine particle size. But finer the particle, the surface area will be higher, and the crystalline region will be disrupted, and the saccharification will be better.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir. This was a very enlightening session for us, and thank you very much again. So, Vikas, sir, the next session will start at 12.
Thank you.
Sir, you are mute.
Ma'am, the next session will start at 12 p.m. The next speaker is of the day is Dr. Professor Dr. B.N. Misra, sir. So we'll stay tuned till 12 p.m. We'll be back at 12.
Okay, sir. So now
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Vikas sir, excuse me, the next session will be on the MS Teams portal itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Sir?